Hello everyone, I'm Chris, and this is a full recap of Thor Love and Thunder released in 2022. If you end up enjoying this video and want to see more from us, then make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to know anytime we upload a new video. Although some mixed reviews surrounding the fourth Thor film released a few months ago, it still proved to be another huge commercial success for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Out of the 29 movies in the MCU, Thor Love and Thunder ranks 16th in lifetime gross worldwide, racking in $747 million, while also ranking 13th in lifetime gross domestically, having made $337 million in the United States and Canada. We personally really enjoyed Thor 4 and think it did a great job of reinventing some previously established characters while telling a heartwarming and fun story. But if you want to hear more of our thoughts on this movie, as well as the character of Thor as a whole, then click the third link in the description for our Old Thor versus New Thor video. And before you continue on with our recap of the film, make sure you watch the actual movie first, which will also be linked in the description. The movie opens on an unknown alien planet where we see the last of its people, Gorr and his daughter Love. With his daughter on the brink of death from starvation, he prays to his god Rapu for help, but his prayers fall on deaf ears and she passes in his arms. After burying her body beneath the sand, he begins to hear a voice calling out to him in the distance. So he follows it and discovers an oasis filled with fresh fruits that he promptly begins scoffing down before being met by Rapu, who's revealed to have just killed the latest wielder of the Necrosword, an ancient weapon that corrupts its wielder and absorbs their life force, whilst giving them the ability to slay gods. Gorr believes he's been brought before Rapu so he can fulfill the promise of an eternal reward, but Rapu instead mocks and laughs at him, revealing there never was one. A betrayed Gorr then renounces his god, prompting Rapu to begin strangling him to death, until suddenly the Necrosword calls to and curses Gorr, allowing him to stab Rapu in the neck. With this newfound power, he vows that all gods will die before landing a final and fatal strike. We're then taken to the planet Indigar, as Korg begins telling its people about the legend of Thor Odin's son, in which he basically explains our entire everything you need to know before watching Thor Love and Thunder video. Though he does also explain what adventures he and the Guardians of the Galaxy have gone on since leaving Earth following their victory alongside the Avengers against Thanos, as well as how he managed to get himself back into shape. He does still feel deep sorrow and pain, having lost basically all of his closest friends and family, but nonetheless he's continued fighting, and now looks to protect Indigar alongside the Guardians from some bird-like creatures who had arrived to take claim to the Indigarian sacred temple since it's no longer under the protection of their gods, as they'd been killed in the time between Gorr's vow and the current battle. So Thor very flamboyantly, single-handedly takes out the invaders, although he ends up destroying the temple anyway en route to victory, resulting in King Khan gifting him 2 very loud goats. The team, along with the goats, then head on to the Guardians' ship, the Milano, inside of which they view a large number of distress calls that had emerged throughout the galaxy, as a number of gods have been murdered by a man labeled the God Butcher, with one call even coming from Thor's close friend, Lady Sif. So with so many in danger, the team decides to split up, saddening Thor, who's then comforted by Star-Lord, as he understands what it's like to lose someone, but says that it's better to have found love than to never loved at all. And with that, as well as an abnormally long handshake, the Guardians depart on their ship, leaving Thor and Korg to find Sif, which they soon do through the Bifrost on the galactic frontier, ruled by the now deceased god, Falagar the Behemoth. There they find Sif defeated with a severed arm, and she warns them that the God Butcher is headed to New Asgard next. Following Asgard's destruction during Ragnarok, the Asgardians were forced to move to a new location, and decided on Tonsberg, Norway on Earth, which had housed what's been described as the Jewel of Odin's treasure room, the Tesseract, containing the Space Stone for centuries prior to World War II, during which it was collected by S.H.I.E.L.D. In memory of their home planet, they renamed the village New Asgard, which has since been thriving under King Valkyrie's leadership, who was given the mantle prior to Thor's departure from Earth with the Guardians. But they now face their first attack as Gorr sends shadow monsters to capture the town's children, and this leads to a battle between the monsters and Asgard's army, who are then joined by a returning Thor. But he's quickly distracted by what appears to be the sound of his former hammer Mjolnir, which he'd been given by his father and wielded for centuries, until his sister Hela, the goddess of death, destroyed it with her bare hands. He's since created a new weapon, Stormbreaker, but still can't help but be fixated on Mjolnir's return, so he summons it towards him, but to his surprise, it springs back into the hands of Jane Foster. Thor met Jane over a decade ago after being banished from Asgard by his father, which led to the two falling in love and being romantically involved for about 4 years, but they soon grew distant from one another as he spent more time on duty as a superhero and she continued becoming a more accomplished astrophysicist, and this ultimately led to the two breaking up. It appeared they'd never see each other again until recently when Jane was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and although she began undergoing treatment, her likelihood of recovery was low, but she soon gained new hope after feeling Mjolnir calling for her, so she traveled to New Asgard where the dismembered Mjolnir is now a tourist attraction. During their time together, Thor, as Jane was sleeping one night, had Mjolnir promise to always take care of her, which unknowingly left an enchantment, and so now Mjolnir fulfills that promise and reforms to give Jane the power of the mighty Thor. But before Thor can try to understand any of this, Gorr arrives and the two engage in a short brawl until Thor overpowers him and he retreats with the captured children. As they begin their search for the kids, the two Thors take time to catch up after about 9 years apart, although Jane perceives it as closer to 4 years, likely due to her being blipped for 5 years by Thanos. But Thor is soon contacted by one of the captured children named Axel, who happens to be the son of Asgard's former powerful gatekeeper Heimdall, who was also a close friend of Thor's before being killed by Thanos. His powers were passed down to his son though, hence why he's able to bring a vision ghost of Thor inside the mouth of the shadow monster where the kids are currently trapped. Upon realizing they're headed to the Shadow Realm, where Gorr will be at the peak of his powers, Thor, Korg, Valkyrie, and Jane plan on traveling to Omnipotent City, home to the most respected and famous gods overseen by the Olympian king of gods Zeus, in hopes of gaining their help in the battle. Before they begin their journey though, we see that although Mjolnir appeared beneficial to her health, the power is actually causing her to grow weaker, with her dropping the hammer to reveal she's sicker than before. This prompts a flashback to when she was a young girl, as her mother was also dying of cancer, but her mother's words encourage her to continue fighting, and she picks the hammer back up. So the four make their way to Omnipotent City on a ship led by Stormbreaker and the Screaming Goats, and once there, they disguise themselves as emotion gods in order to join the Council of the Godheads meeting, during which they pass by several gods, including the likes of Bao, the god of dumplings, and the god of Korg's race, the Kronins, Nini of the Nani. Zeus then makes his grand entrance before the council, and begins discussing where they plan on holding this year's orgy, as well as announcing the winner for the most human souls sacrificed in the name of a god, which turns Jane and Valkyrie sour towards him. But Thor still believes in Zeus, since he'd been his hero growing up, and eventually he approaches the stage to ask for his help in raising an army against Gorr. But Zeus doesn't believe he's a threat, shrugging off the fact that he's already killed a number of gods, which leads Thor to question his integrity, and for that, Zeus chains him to the ground and removes his disguise with a flick, accidentally taking off all of his clothes in the process, revealing an R.I.P. Loki tattoo, as well as one with a list of the loved ones he's lost on his back. Thor once again attempts to plead with him, explaining that Gorr is kidnapped as guardian children, but still Zeus refuses to offer any help, believing he's already perfectly safe in Omnipotent City and not worried about Gorr reaching eternity, one of the cosmic entities at the center of the universe that is said to grant the desire of the first person to reach it, since he doesn't have the key. So Thor, having accepted they won't help, asks for Zeus to at least allow them to borrow his lightning rod, Thunderbolt, for the battle, but Zeus declines that request as well, and refuses to let them leave at all, as they can potentially reveal Omnipotent City's locations at Gorr. So he sends his guards after him, forcing Jane, Valkyrie, and Korg to intervene, which then prompts Zeus to get involved as he launches Thunderbolt into Korg's body, seemingly killing him before then launching it at Thor. But an infuriated Thor manages to catch it and launch it back at Zeus, impaling him through the chest. It turns out though, Korg survived the attack, as the only part of a Kronan needed to survive is its face. So Thor grabs him and leaves with Jane and Valkyrie, the latter of whom steals Zeus's Thunderbolt, and return on their journey to the Shadow Realm, although slightly worried that the entire god community will be hunting them down for the rest of their lives. During their trip, as he and Jane are looking out at space dolphins, Thor becomes overwhelmed by his feelings, and finally confesses that he's still in love with her. But in response, Jane reveals that she has cancer. The heartbreaking news doesn't stop Thor from pushing for love though, as he no longer wants to allow his fear of losing love to stop him from experiencing it at all. So the two share a kiss and promise to spend whatever time she has left together. They then finally enter the Shadow Realm, but are confused as to why the children don't appear to be there, until upon further inspection, Jane realizes it to be a trap after discovering writings that reveal the Bifrost and in turn Stormbreaker are the key to eternity. So she launches the weapon into the stars as Gorr emerges from and traps them within the shadows. He tries to force Thor to call the axe, but he won't relent, so Gorr uses his love for Jane against him and begins choking her to death, which works in getting Thor to call Stormbreaker. The three then engage in a battle against Gorr and his shadow monsters, but as the battle wears on, Jane begins to wear down, and with her weakened and Thor distracted with the shadow monsters, Valkyrie ends up getting stabbed through the abdomen by Gorr. So they attempt to exit through the Bifrost, but just as they begin traveling through it, Gorr is able to grab hold of Stormbreaker and pry it from Thor's hands. Upon arriving back on New Asgard, Jane falls unconscious, so Thor takes her along with Valkyrie to the hospital, where he's informed that Mjolnir is draining Jane's life force every time she uses it, making her unable to fight off the cancer. So he tells her to stay here and rest while he goes to save the children on his own, believing that if there's any chance for her to live, she has to take it, as it could be their last chance to be together. And although she wants to continue fighting, she agrees to stay behind. Valkyrie is also unable to join him in the battle, so she gives him Zeus's Thunderbolt, which he then uses to instantaneously travel to the center of the universe, where Gorr's already begun using Stormbreaker to open Eternity's gate. Also there are the Asgardian children, who Thor quickly saves from captivity and gathers together, realizing he could help them help him in battling the shadow monsters. So he has them each grab whatever weapon they can find and uses Zeus's Thunderbolt to grant them, for a limited time only, the power of Thor. The children then engage in a battle with the shadow monsters as Thor battles Gorr, and although the kids are succeeding on their side of the brawl, Gorr continues to get the better of Thor and is on the verge of killing him before being knocked away by Mjolnir, launched by a returning Jane, who had sensed her lover's distress, so decided to wield Mjolnir one more time. And together, the two are able to overpower Gorr and destroy the Necrosword, ridding him of his powers, while also recovering Stormbreaker, which Thor then tosses to Axel so he and the kids can return home. But it appears too late, as Gorr had already managed to open Eternity's gate and has begun making his way towards the entity, ready to make his wish. Thor pleads for him to stop, but Gorr insists he has to, believing it's the only way to avenge his daughter. So Thor accepts defeat and goes to spend his last moments with Jane, although he hopes Gorr will choose love as he has and bring his daughter back. But a dying Gorr claims she'll be left alone and without a father, to which Jane assures him she won't be, knowing Thor will look after her. So he uses his one wish to bring her back to life and gets to share one more moment with her before being overcome by the sword's curse. Jane's time is almost up as well, so she and Thor share I love yous, and those prove to be her final words as she passes following their final kiss goodbye. Later, we again hear from Korg as he's telling the legend of the mighty Thor, Jane Foster, who's since been immortalized in New Asgard with a statue. We also see that the kids have now begun training in combat under Sif and King Valkyrie, while Korg himself has fully regenerated and seeks to produce offspring with a fellow Cronin named Dwayne. Thor, meanwhile, has begun raising Gorr's daughter as his own and traveling with her throughout the galaxy, whilst wielding Mjolnir and Stormbreaker respectively, to offer assistance to whomever needs it, all the while becoming known as Love and Thunder. In a mid-credits scene, we see a still-alive Zeus as he's recovering from his injuries, furious with how superheroes have diminished the perception of the gods. So he sends out his son Hercules to kill Thor and remind the galaxy that the gods are to be feared once again. In a post-credit scene, we see Jane entering the gates of what's revealed to be Valhalla by Heimdall, who welcomes her to the afterlife. And that was our full recap and explanation of Thor, Love and Thunder. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to see more videos like this, just click the second link in the description for our Marvel playlist. We'll be coming out with more Marvel related videos in the near future, so be on the lookout for that. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.